Hey, what's going on, guys? David F. Haas here, David F. Haas Podcast. Back in the studio, trying to figure out how to do this thing on my own. It's not going great, but we're getting there. We're getting there. I'm learning. I'm moving along, trying to become independent so I can release this stuff quickly, so we can get out to more people. But yeah, as you can tell, it's a struggle with respect to my release dates. But it's something I'm working through, and my hope is to continue to bring more of this content to more people. Every now and then I get a message from someone saying, hey, I just listened to your podcast. I really got a lot from it. And I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe I should keep doing that. But anyways, today's podcast is about understanding why we remain stuck, understanding why we have been unable to step out of patterns that we've been into for a long, long time. So the title of the podcast is What's Your Broken Record? So what I want you to think about when you think about what your broken record is like, what is that one thing that you've been struggling with your whole entire life? You know, if I think about mine, it's like food. I have been struggling with food since I was 9 years old. I've mentioned many times in the podcast that my mother died when I was 9. I was pretty much left on my own from 7 years old to kind of like take care of myself. And if you leave a 7-year-old in charge of his diet, like what's he going to eat? And it was like hot dogs, candy, pop, sugar, all of these things, right? So that basically established these terrible eating patterns. It probably messed up things physically as well that led me to be addicted to sugar. And so that's my one thing. That's the thing that when everything goes wrong, I go to eating like shit. When I got whenever everything goes right, actually, I go to eating like shit. And so that's my broken record. And so what I'm inviting you to kind of tune into right now as we're on this podcast together, if you're listening in your car or whatever, we're going to kind of like do the work in the podcast, which I think might be kind of fun. And so the question I ask for you is, what is your broken record? What is that one thing that you just haven't been able to resolve? Maybe you can never get your relationships right. Maybe you're a people pleaser. Maybe you're a controller. I don't know. I want you to think about that one thing, that one area of your life that you just can't seem to get right. That's your broken record, and we're gonna try today to help you step out of that broken record so that you can get to the root of why that is happening. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do that in a couple of ways. The first thing is just by setting the intention and by creating the awareness that you have a broken record, you have a thing. I don't like the name broken record. There's got to be a better one out there, but you have a thing that has kind of been plaguing you your whole entire life. And just by setting the intention that you want to break free from that, you want to transcend it, you want to get to the root of why that's happening, by setting that intention alone, you are setting the path to becoming free of that thing. And one of the things that blocked me for a long, long time with respect to food was trying to control it. I just tried to control it for so long, and I wasn't getting out of my own way. I wasn't getting out of my way so that I could let the power of the universe, the power of God, bring the answers to me that had been around me the whole entire time that I couldn't see because I was trying to control every element of it. So when we tune into this intention that we want to become aware of why we are stuck in this broken record, in this pattern, and we want to become free of it, we then open the door to all of the answers kind of flowing in. And the less we try and control, the more the answers are going to flow in. So I've given this example of many times, but when we tune our radar in to looking for answers, we are going to begin seeing them. If you're thinking about buying a Jeep and you never drove a Jeep before, and you're like, oh, I think I'm going to buy a Jeep. All of a sudden you start seeing Jeeps all over the place. Well, why is that? It's not that Jeeps weren't there before. It's because you tuned your consciousness into looking for Jeeps, okay? And so we can do this exact same thing with our intentions. We want to tune our consciousness into breaking free from this pattern. And once we do that, we are going to begin to see the answers that have been around us our entire lives, but we had been blind to them because we've been trapped in this pattern. So the first step is awareness. We have an awareness around what our broken record is, and now we are going to move forward to change that. The second thing is we need to understand how real change happens. And this is where, I think so many people are stuck, right? Is that we hear that we have a behavior that is unwanted. So change your thoughts and you can change your reality. And so all you got to do is change your thoughts, and you're going to be a new person. And Hawkins, my mentor, the guy that I do most of my studying under, said this one thing that I repeat to my clients over and over again is, what you hold in mind tends to manifest. So we want to be very careful about what we're holding in mind. So if you hold in mind that you're unhealthy, for example, I'm using my example, then you are going to be unhealthy. If you hold in mind, like mine was, I'm addicted to Diet Coke, Coke Zero actually, then that is going to manifest into my life. But it also, the reverse is true, because the mind doesn't differentiate negative from positive. So if I'm constantly thinking that I shouldn't be drinking Diet Coke or Coke Zero, then the mind only hears drink Coke Zero. It doesn't hear the shouldn't. And so, and I don't know exactly how that works, but essentially you're still holding in mind this idea of drinking or doing this bad thing. And so the mind's not really differentiating from one way or the other. So now we make this realization that, oh, my thoughts are creating my reality. In my case, my thoughts of not drinking or drinking pop led me to drinking more pop. Okay, that's great. So let me just change those thoughts. Well, that's a lot easier said than done. And this is, if you envision like a pyramid, right, or a triangle. At the top of the triangle, we have behavior. So, like, what's the behavior you want to change? That's what we just tuned into with your broken record. So now you know the behavior. Mine was eating unhealthy, drinking pop. What are the thoughts that are associated? So the second layer, the second level of the triangle is your thoughts. What are the thoughts that are associated around your broken record? So mine were, I can't stop. I have this pattern, that started from childhood. Everything I've done doesn't work. This stuff is going to kill me. Like, these are the thoughts that are, I'm just using my own example. So I want you to write out or think about, as you're kind of driving, what are all the thoughts that you have that are associated, or beliefs even, that you are associated around what your broken record is. So this is where like 90% of the world is saying, this is how you change your life, just change your thoughts. But the problem is that our thoughts are being generated from something, right? And it's our subconscious. So our subconscious mind, we have about 70,000 subconscious thoughts every single day. And if we try and inject a few positive thoughts here and there against our 70,000 subconscious thoughts, we're just fighting a losing battle. And so what we want to look at, instead of change your thinking so that you can change your behavior, or change your thoughts so you can change your reality, is we want to look at what's below the next level, is, why are we having those thoughts in the first place? Okay, and this is where real change begins. It's at the bottom half of this triangle. And this guy Masson Kipp, and I'm sure he pulled it from somebody as well, but he has this thing. It's called the transformation ladder, and this is where he kind of breaks this thing down. But basically, the whole entire world is focused on behavior and thoughts, and we're trying to change that. We do this all the time when we see people that are struggling. It's like, you see like a homeless person or an alcoholic, and you say, it's like, oh, why don't they just change that behavior? Right? Well, it's because they're battling against a program that's been plaguing them their whole entire life. And it's like, if they could do better, they would do better. But they haven't uncovered the bottom half of this triangle, which is what is throwing all of these thoughts into their life. Like, for example, like, I can't stop, I'm not good enough, alcohol has a grip on me, whatever it may be. What is fueling all of those thoughts? So when we go to the next layer of the triangle, so we have behavior, then thoughts, and then underneath that we have emotion or belief. So those are the next two levels: belief systems and emotion. And these ones, I find they swap. Like, all kinds of like I've had like psychologists comment on my page, an emotion comes before a belief, or a belief comes before emotion. It's like, I don't give a shit which way it happens. Okay, so just recognizing what is the belief or the emotion that is associated with all of those thoughts that you're having. So the belief for me, for example, is, and I'm just tuning into this as I was doing this podcast, was the belief for me was, I never developed any good patterns around food. So that's why I'm all messed up. Right? That's a belief, And so that belief is responsible for millions and millions of thoughts throughout the course of my life. And so now, as I tune into that belief, I can recognize, like, oh, and underneath that belief is an emotion. Is the emotion of, I'm doing my own transformation ladder here. There's the emotion of, nobody loves me and nobody wants to take care of me, right? Which is the feeling of being unworthy or unloved, or whatever that may be. All right. And so this emotion of not having a caregiver, right? Not feeling loved. It is this emotion paired with this belief. It is the nuclear power plant. And the output from this nuclear power plant is thoughts. And so in order to stop all of these thoughts, we need to shut down the nuclear power plant, right? That emotion is what is creating our thoughts, and those thoughts are what are creating our reality, okay? So if we begin to dig deeper into this, then we say, okay, well, now we've identified why we are doing this. The fifth step on the ladder is, well, where did that begin in our lives? When did we start developing this pattern of eating like shit, right? And, you know, for me, if I look back at mine, it's like, well, I was going through a very difficult time in my life where my mother was my primary caregiver, and then all of a sudden wasn't around. She's in hospital doing whatever, and then eventually she dies. And so now I don't even have a primary caregiver. So as I'm going through processing all of these really, really real emotions, my escape from them was chocolate, ice cream, pop, all of these things. So they allowed me to come out of that. And then I tied this belief system to it all that, there's another belief system that's tied to this thing is like, oh, food makes me feel good. Okay. Food takes away the pain, all of this stuff. Right. So now as I begin to recognize this, what I can do is I can then begin to deal with the actual emotion around this behavior, as opposed to trying to fight against 70,000 subconscious thoughts. Okay. So as I begin to tune into that emotion, then I need to go to the next step, which is to let all of that go. And how do you do that? And the letting go process is, I think, where most people get stuck, because no one really knows how to actually let things go. Well, I should say no one. Most people don't know how to let go of things. And so we hear this all the time, just let it go. Like our family and friends are saying, just let it go. And what they're really saying is just suppress it, just forget about it, just push it down so far that you never have to deal with it. The problem is even the things that we have pushed down out of our consciousness, they are still creating the behaviors that are unwanted. So until we create the awareness around what that emotion is, those behaviors are still going to continue to plague us. And this is why we get trapped in the things that we don't want to do for so long, because we might not even be aware of what it is that we have shoved down so deep that we've forgotten about, and how it is still affecting our lives today. Okay, so how do you let something go? The key process to letting go is real simple. You have to tune into the emotion fully. So you have to go back to that original incident in your life. And it doesn't matter if you don't get to the original incident, as long as you get to some incident where you can make that pain real again, right? So whatever moment that is for you that is associated with this behavior, which is associated with the thoughts, which is associated with the belief, which is associated with emotions, wherever you first remember feeling that emotion of unwanted, undeserving, unloved, whatever else, there's a million that you could tune into, right? I was just doing one with a client. It's like of the feeling of not being dependable and the pain of letting people down, right? So whatever that emotion is, what you need to do is bring yourself back to that moment in time and allow yourself to tune into that emotion fully. And so now there's a thing that we need to recognize about emotions, is that emotions are held in the body, okay? And they can be felt in the body. This is like what an emotion is. It's like when you feel sad, you feel it in the body. The physical body cries, right? So we can tune in at a physical level to what this emotion feels like. And so if you tune into grief, it's like it's painful. You feel it in the center of the chest and the bottom of the throat. It's like pit in the stomach. So that physical cue is something that we can use to notice when we begin to reduce the emotion. So what we need to do is we need to bring ourselves back. We need to bring that emotion up. We need to ask ourselves, on a scale of 1 to 10, how angry am I right now about this situation? And let's say it's 10 out of 10. Okay, great. Let's sit in the anger. And what does the anger feel like? Well, to me, anger feels like rage. I can feel like my fist clenching. I can feel tightness in the chest. And so almost like a tightness in the shoulder. So these are my physical cues. So then I say, okay, let me sit in that emotion. Let me stay there fully in these physical symptoms. And then this is where everyone gets stuck, is that the mind, our ego, wants to do everything in its power to make sure you don't feel that emotion, because its primary function is to keep us safe, not only from physical harm, but also from emotional harm. And so when we finally have the courage to say, oh no, I'm ready, the mind is going to be like, there's no way we're going back there. And it's going to try and distract, it's going to try and justify, it's going to try and condemn, it's going to try and give you other scenarios. It's going to do everything that it's been doing your whole entire life to make sure that you don't reconnect to this pain. So our challenge in letting go isn't actually staying with the emotion. That's actually relatively simple, letting it process. The challenge is noticing all of that resistance and moving through all of that resistance. So as we connect to the emotion, every thought that enters our mind about the said emotion needs to be ignored. Okay? And this is where people really get stuck in the resistance to fully connecting to the emotion. That usually has to be observed and let go of before we can fully stay in the emotion. Now, here's the crazy thing, is that emotions, some of the worst emotions that there are, grief, loss, shame, if we are able to fully connect, the energy of that emotion will run its course in a matter of 5 or 10 minutes. And so we could potentially have been avoiding change our whole entire life for sitting in in exchange for sitting in 5 or 10 minutes of pain. Let me give you a practical example of that. So one of the things that happened to me was when I was a kid, I was in my dad's garage. I was playing on the welding tanks. These welding tanks fell on me, and I was trapped under there for like 30 minutes. Eventually, my mom came out, rescued me, pulled me out. It was like this whole miraculous thing. I've talked about this story on the podcast. But from that incident, I developed claustrophobia. I was very fearful of confined spaces, and I was very fearful of being pinned down. So that claustrophobia led me to a life of avoiding any confrontation with any man, essentially, out of the fear that it might turn into a fight and I might get pinned down and I might have a panic attack. And now, as I say it out loud, it seems so silly, but I recognize that refusal to sit in the fear, right? To stay in the fear of a confined space and just be like, I'm here, I'm okay still, led me to this lifelong behavior of people pleasing that did not serve me in any way whatsoever. And so as I made that recognition, then I began to recognize, I got to deal with this fear of claustrophobia. So I joined jiu-jitsu where I got pinned down all the time. And that helped because it gave me a safe space to be pinned and not being able to breathe, and recognizing my intention, like my desire to tap, but then just breathe through it. And so that helped a little bit. But eventually, I was able to put myself in a few situations where I was able to actually just breathe through the fear of claustrophobia. And the one time was in my attic. And I think it was because I had made this intention to heal, which is how we started today's podcast, actually. I had made this intention. I recognized that all of these connections between claustrophobia and people pleasing and how it was not serving me. I made all these connections, and now I was doing the work to heal. And so one of the things was jiu-jitsu. The other thing was I just started, inviting these situations in my life where I might have to go into a confined space. And I was in my attic, and I had to crawl through this one little hole, and the claustrophobia took over me. Like it had so many times in the past. And what does it look like? Heavy breathing, tightness in the chest. Plus I was in an attic full of insulation, and it's just like I couldn't breathe, and everything in my being, my mind, my ego is just saying, get out of that attic. Right. And then I recognized, I'm like, here's an opportunity to sit in it. So I sat there and I breathed through it. I felt the emotion fully. Every thought that entered my mind about it was, like, you don't need to do this. Like, just get out of the attic. It's like, you've already done so much work on it. It was like my mind's just telling everything. And I just keep ignoring, stay. Stayed there for about 2 or 3 minutes. The energy of the emotion passed. I was able to crawl through a tighter hole than I've ever crawled through in my entire life, do all the work that I had to do in my attic. And from that point forward, I was free of my emotion I was free of the fear of claustrophobia, of confined spaces. And so it will still rear its ugly head every now and then. I was just on a plane recently and it kind of popped up for me, but I now have the tools. I just breathe through it again, right? And I recognize that fear that I've been avoiding my whole entire life wasn't that bad. And that could be insert whatever emotion it is that you have: grief, shame, the feeling of unworthiness, the feeling of not being loved, that feeling that you have been avoiding your whole entire life. If you really sit in it and you really tune into all the resistances and you let all of them go, then that emotion will lose all of its power. And when that nuclear power reactor shuts down, all of the thoughts and belief systems that are associated with it also go away. And then your behavior now has a clear space to change. And this is when we can insert positive thinking and all of that other stuff, because now our mind is not clouded with all of these thoughts that are associated to this emotion. So this is the process of real change, right? Real change doesn't happen through force. It happens through setting an intention to heal and allowing the awarenesses to come to us. And then once we have the awareness of what it is, and we've made the connection to how all of this stuff has been not serving us, then there is this moment where you have to have courage to go and finally face that emotion and sit with it until all of its energy is gone. And if you can learn how to go through this process, you can change any behavior that is not serving you, right? As we begin to make these connections. So this is essentially how real change happens, right? And if you follow this process, you could probably re-listen to this podcast and like actually write it out, or I could have some journaling cues or something along those lines in there. But if you follow this process, you're going to be able to make real change in your life. So I hope this podcast served you, and I hope I'm going to set the intention to try and release more podcasts so that I can release more information to more people, because I know it's beneficial, I know it's helpful, I know this is what people need. So if you haven't already, just click that subscribe button if you're on YouTube or on podcast. And yeah, just keep an eye on my socials. I'm going to try and release some more stuff. Thanks for taking the time to listen. We'll see you again soon.